semicolon, every semicolon, the Israel-Palestine conflict. And sometimes I wonder, was that a wise investment of time? You take all the Israelis, 7.5 million, add to them all the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories, another 4 million, throw in the Palestinian refugees, throw in the Jews who still want to return to their ancient homeland. You add up the whole figure, and you don't even get one housing project on one block in Shanghai. And it makes you wonder. I've spent so much time, so many years, for something, a tiny pinprick on the world's map. Tiny pinprick. I think now there's reason to be hopeful. The revolts in the Arab world, the changing public opinion, there are grounds to be hopeful. There are also grounds to despair. I don't want to pretend otherwise. The murky recantation of Mr. Goldstone, I was pretty shattered, I have to say. And it was a huge blow, and he has a lot to account for what he did. I have to be clear, assuming he did it of his volition, he has a lot to account for. It's not entirely clear what his motivation was. As John Dugard, the eminent jurist, wrote yesterday in the New Statesman, he said, why Mr. Goldstone, Dugard knows Goldstone very well, they're both South African. In my opinion, Dugard is the better legal mind, but they're both distinguished. And he said, why Mr. Goldstone did what he did will remain a closely guarded secret. So I don't know why he did what he did, but the damage, the fallout, has been terrible. As Gideon Levy wrote today in Haaretz, and actually I wrote the same thing 3 days ago. I was writing something and I quoted Richard Goldstone renews Israel's license to kill, and Gideon Levy wrote today, the headline was, Goldstone's recantation paves the way for a new Israeli assault on Gaza. So there are a lot of reasons to be despairing, but at the end of the day, I'm determined to get to the finishing line, to see that this conflict is finally resolved as a just, a lasting peace. I always liked the line of the late Professor Edward Said. He liked to quote the Caribbean poet M.A. Cesar, there's room for everyone at the rendezvous of victory. There's room for everyone at the rendezvous of victory. I like that line, not only because of its poetic touch, but because usually when you think of victory, you think of victor and vanquished. But that's not what Professor Said, quoting M.A. Cesar, said. There's no victor and there's no vanquished. There's room for everyone at the rendezvous of victory. Just be reasonable. Be reasonable. Does it sound reasonable that the blockade of Gaza is okay because there's no starvation, there's just hunger? Does that sound reasonable? 60% of Gaza's population is under 18 years of age. Does it sound reasonable that it's okay, as Judge Turco said, to keep the blockade on Gaza because the children are only going to bed hungry at night? They're not starving to death. Does that sound reasonable? Be reasonable. There are just two components to achieve an end to the conflict. Number one, we have to be principled. Principled is not an abstract term. It has a concrete meaning in the world in which we live. It means upholding the legal rights of the Palestinians under international law. And those rights have been validated, ratified, and reiterated in every public body that's relevant to the conflict. The International Court of Justice, the UN General Assembly, the main human rights organizations, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, they all say the same thing. The principles for resolving the conflict are a full Israeli withdrawal to the territories it occupied, from the territories it occupied in June 1967, the right of the Palestinians to exercise statehood in the whole of the West Bank, the whole of Gaza, and the whole of East Jerusalem, recognition between the Palestinian state and the Israeli state, and a just resolution of the Palestinian refugee question based on the right of return and compensation. Those are the terms. That's the law. That is the law, as it's been ratified by every human rights organization, the United Nations General Assembly, the International Court of Justice. So the first thing is to be principled, to support the law. And the second thing is to be reasonable. We have to show the Israelis and their supporters there is a way to end the conflict. It doesn't have to go on through eternity. And it doesn't have to verge on something terminal. Just be reasonable. And we can find principles that enable everyone on all sides, everyone on all sides, to have their basic human rights intact, their human dignity intact, and their self-respect intact. If you're principled, and as I say, it's not an abstract topic, it's not an abstract concept. When I say principle, it means one thing. Do you believe in the law? Do you believe in the rule of law? If you're principled, you believe in the rule of law, and you're reasonable, you want to find ways to resolve the conflict, not strike radical poses, not engage in rhetorical debates. If you are principled and you're reasonable, then I think there's room, and I mean this, I mean it. There is room for everyone in this room at that rendezvous of victory. There is room for everyone. Search your heart and search your mind. Do you believe in being principled, the rule of law, and are you a reasonable person? Do you want to defend dropping white phosphorus on hospitals? Do you want to defend sending the kids to bed hungry at night? If you don't want to defend that,